the hand signals on this platform. One of the great ways that we've been using in our caucus meetings is something that the deaf community often uses. So also waving hands is a great way to show some solidarity or if something resonates. And I want to echo the acknowledgement. I'm also here on the homelands of the Lekwungen peoples, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations, and it is just such an honor to be with all of you for a moment. And I'm sorry I can't stay for the whole thing. My caucus is meeting right now, and so I've just ducked out for a quick moment, but it's really important for me to be here with you. Youth across Canada have been showing such leadership, especially when it comes to fighting for economic justice, for ecological justice. And I think in these really unusual and challenging times, we are going to start to think about what it means to recover, what a just, sustainable recovery plan looks like. And I think that youth voices and your voices, the voices of the people here today on this call, are going to be incredibly important. We can't return to the normal that we had before. The normal we had before was not working for a lot of people in our communities, and it wasn't working for our planet. And I'm really excited to collaborate with all of you on really envisioning kind of what that future looks like. And I'm so grateful for the work that each of you have put into contributing to our community, contributing to making our, protecting our environment and making our world more just. So I won't take up any more time because I do want to hear from you folks. Yeah, just a big, big thank you for everything that you're doing, and I wanted to let you know how inspired I am by all of you.
Thanks so much, Laurel, for being here and for all of your work pushing for social and ecological justice. And I know that I know from working with you that you value the voices of young people and their experiences and the credibility of their leadership in these challenging times. So with that, enough of me. But one last point is that if I just put it in the chat, so if you have, if you want to send messages of encouragement to any of the speakers, echo any of the things they're saying, give general support, you can do that in the chat function. You can also ask questions there, and at the end we'll have a question and answer period. So you can, if you have questions for any of the speakers, feel free to type them up there, and myself and Kyle will make sure they're collected and make sure that we can get as many as we can answered at the end of the event. So with that, we're going to move on to our speakers, and we do have some amazing young people to hear directly from this morning. Our first speaker of the day is Talen Rimmer, and Talen is a marine biologist and poet. I've had the honor of knowing Talen for feels like many years. I think probably 5 years. I'm not sure. Time is strange. But I met Talen as a poet, and I've been inspired by his work, both as an artist and his passion for the conservation of the natural environment since I met him. So I'm really excited that to see him honored in this way, and also to hear his story of how he came to this place. So with that, please give, and with all the ways we can, give a warm welcome to Talen.
Hi, everyone. I love that little hands and emojis. It's really, really good. Can everyone, sorry, I'm going to start this by offering an apology. I am currently on the east coast of Australia. I just moved into a new place yesterday, and it is 3 a.m. So I am going to be very groggy. But I think we can all hear me okay. I don't have Wi-Fi. This is just what I have. Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Jeremy. I agree. I don't know exactly how long I've known you, but it feels like for a very long time. Yeah, so, and I'm had the privilege of working and listening to Jeremy as well. Jeremy actually was one of the people who kind of helped to bring me into the world of poetry initially. And so anyways, hi everyone. My name is Talen. I was born and raised on Lekwungen territories as well, actually. But right now I'm on the lands of the Gia and Ngaro peoples. I moved here a little while ago, shortly before kind of pandemic, and I've opted to stay here for work in the last little while. But what I'm here to talk to you about today, and thank you so much, Kyle, and everyone for having me here. It's truly an honor, and yeah, I'm in awe of being able to speak amongst these amazing youth and other people. But today I'm going to just share a little bit, a short story of kind of how I came to regard myself as I do now as a scientist and a settler, and how I came to understand a bit of the place where I grew up a little bit better. So as I was saying, I was born and raised on the Lekwungen territories in Victoria, actually right next to what's now known as Clover Point or Ross Bay in Fairfield. And if you haven't been to those places before, there, Clover Point is kind of this little outlook drive, rocky point that cars can go along, and you can look out over the ocean and towards the United States. And then adjacent next to it, Ross Bay is kind of this pebble rocky beach that kind of slopes down to the water with these few little rocky stone outcrops. And I grew up very close to here. I had the privilege of learning how to ride a bike on these lands on Clover Point, and I had my first little elementary school race just along the shores there. My father, who's Australian, part of the reason why I'm here, he taught me how to fish off of Ross Bay as well. And so it played a big part in my growing up. And until 2 months ago, when I moved here, I was still, I had a little running trail that would go along Ross Bay, and I'd do that every few days. So it played a big part. It's very important to me. But that's kind of the extent that I knew about the area until I think about second or third year university, when I took this course. It was called ethnoecology. It was with this professor, Darcy Matthews. If anybody knows him as well. Yes, I see some faces there. Yeah, so I took Dr. Matthews' course. It's amazing. And one of the very first assignments that he had us do was he said, go out and think of a place that really matters to you. Go to that place and do a bit of digging into the history of what that place has been and what it is currently. And so I did that. And so I went down, I used a little bit of cell phone data, and I went down and I sat down by Ross Bay and Clover Point and kind of tried to see what I could find about the history of the area, because I knew there was on Lekwungen territories. And I learned a bit about it. I learned a bit that Clover Point actually got its name by settlers here when it was, or its current name, before its lush red clover. It's actually filled with this very long clover that was harvested by Lekwungen peoples. And shortly after it was colonized, it was turned into a shooting range at one point and a hotel. It's had a few different little lives over that time period. And so what we know today, actually, with the pavement, isn't actually, it hasn't been there forever, is what I'm saying. The grasses that were there now are European grasses. Those didn't used to exist, along with a lot of the scrubby bushland that we know off the cliff, off the side of Clover Point, was also put in there to stop erosion after colonization as well. And so it looked a little bit different. And same with Ross Bay. I have a lot of memories of running along the shoreline of Ross Bay on logs and these rocks. But actually I learned that the logs of Ross Bay in itself weren't there naturally. They were there, only existed there from when the logging industry started to boom, and there started to be more logs put into the Juan de Fuca Strait in the Pacific. And the rocks itself were actually put in there in the late 20th century just to prevent erosion from the shoreline. Ross Bay actually used to be a sand beach. And these were all things that were very strange to me, because all the things suddenly that I thought to be very permanent about this place were actually not that permanent at all. They're actually on a time scale very, very recent. And so it just got me thinking about a few things, like when we're trying to restore a place, in ecology or conservation. It gets you thinking about what you're trying to restore a place to. Are you trying to restore it to those rocks that were there and put in there, 40 or 50 years ago? Or are you trying to restore it to a pre-colonial version of what it was? And if so, doing that, how do you do that? And you think about who you're working with. And so it just kind of got me thinking about that. And so I dug a little bit deeper. I started to look at, okay, that transition, because myself in the public education system, I wasn't taught necessarily a whole lot about the people whose land I was on. I wasn't taught a lot about the Lekwungen people and how I related to that. So I started to look up things like early colonization of this land, and Sir James Douglas. Those of you who don't know, James Douglas was the first kind of colonial leader of Fort Victoria. And I got a little bit sad because upon reading a lot of this history, I would actually attended Sir James Douglas Elementary School, and I played him in a school play. Okay, but I never kind of learned about what colonization was or what it meant. So it kind of started an interesting conversation in my family where I started to learn about my own ancestry and history, and my ancestors who came here from Sweden and England about a year ago. So there are a couple little takeaways that I'll just jump to here. But the first that I learned from that was kind of a gap in our societal discussion. I really wish I did learn more about that over my upbringing. I didn't get a chance to. So I was really grateful for that kind of opportunity to, not saying I'm better now. I only know the territory that I'm on, and that's basically it. I'm hoping to learn more soon. But I'm hoping that can become a conversation that we start early in our lives around on whose traditional territory we're on. And the second really important thing, though, is the kind of science that I want to do. Like I mentioned earlier, one thing I told my current employers, the position I'm in now, is I don't have a study animal per se. I don't study just one specific organism. But what I'm really, really, really interested in is the kind of science that we are doing, one that acknowledges these colonial structures, like the rocks on Ross Bay, and takes account of that when we're doing science, but also one in an academic sense that is driven by community goals and values, acknowledges that colonialism is a lot of the time how these academic structures were built, and seeks to work to provide either information or values just for people, in a people sense. And so that's a little bit about kind of why I'm doing science work now and what kind of science I'm trying to do, and also how I relate to myself a bit. So I'll stop there because I think I'm out of time as well, and I am very sleepy. But I'm looking forward to hearing about other people as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Please give a round of applause in your house for Talen. Yeah, it's great to hear your story, and thank you for so eloquently speaking to the process of learning and unlearning what it means to be a settler on whatever lands you happen to be on. I know that my process has been similar and continues to this day, and I imagine will continue for the rest of my life, learning both the history and present of colonization and what it means for me to try to work to move forward in a decolonial way, and in a way that enables reconciliation, both in work on council and just work as trying to be a good person and a person who lives respectfully on these lands. So thank you very much. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or send them directly. If you don't want to have them posted publicly, you can send them directly to either Kyle or I through the chat function as well. Our next speaker is Saanich's youngest ever city councillor, and someone I met when he was running for the by-election. And I first was just inspired by the tenacity of a teenager taking not only a run for council, but a real run for council. And there's often in elections, especially at the local level, there's a lot of people who run, and some of them don't mount very strong campaigns. It's kind of a practice of showing up and doing it, which I think has value anyways. But then there's sort of often another level of candidate, which are people who are running to win and running to get that leadership position. And I was inspired to see Ned take it on in that way. And then when in the general election, when he won, he became the youngest ever Saanich councillor, and I believe the youngest ever CRD director. And but since he's been elected, he's not just representing youth voices, he's representing strong, passionate, reasoned leadership on all issues, but particularly environmental issues. And it's been an honor to work with him as a colleague at the CRD table and on regional issues. And I really respect and admire his leadership on environmental justice, and really look forward to hearing his story today. So please give a warm welcome to Ned Taylor.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for such an introduction. I'll just double check. Can everybody hear me okay and see me okay? Yeah, good. Okay. Wow. Well, I just want to thank Jeremy and Kyle for doing our territorial acknowledgement this morning. Also thank Talen for telling us such a story that I think connects with that so well. Just before I get into my story here, I just want to say how inspired I am by not only all of the young people that are in the call this morning, but all of the young people who are awarded in the top 25 Environmentalists Under 25 by Starfish. I think it's great to see Starfish taking the lead and making sure that young people, when they do important work, are recognized for that. And also providing opportunities for young people to connect with one another and learn and get involved in the issues that they're passionate about. So I think that's really, really critical work, and I want to thank Kyle and his team for doing that. So I will tell I guess a bit of my story about how I got elected, how I got into politics in the first place. It all sort of started when I was in high school, about 15 years old, I believe. And I started to notice election campaigns, started to watch election debates, then started to want to go door knocking for certain election campaigns, started to follow news, all these sorts of little things. And throughout high school, I would sort of go through, I don't want to say phases, but sort of periods of time where I was interested in different things. And I was always sort of very interested in different subjects, and I always liked learning. But politics was interesting to me because for most things like that, I would perhaps be really interested for a month or two, learn as much as I could about it, and then maybe find a new interest, something else that I wanted to learn about. But for politics, it sort of always stuck around. And so about sort of a year or two after being interested in politics in high school, I sort of realized that this was something that I was quite passionate about, and I made the decision, I guess, in my own mind in high school that I was going to do something in politics someday. I didn't know what that was going to look like or when that was going to happen or how I was going to do that, but I really made the decision in my own mind that this is what I need to do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I enjoy, and this is what I want to pursue. And so I sort of made that decision for myself, and then upon graduating high school, I took about a year or so. I left myself, I guess, what's called a gap year, which is something that I'd highly recommend if you're in a place where you are not 100% sure about what you want to do in your life. And I, made sure that I had a bit of a trip plan to see a bit of the world before I was going to sort of get my life settled down. And graduating high school in June of 2017, sort of going into the summer, I was planning to leave on this trip in December and take a year for myself to sort of figure out what I wanted to do, I guess, in my life. And upon that time, I realized that there was a by-election for the municipal government that I had grown up in my whole life in Saanich. I've grown up here right in Greater Victoria in Saanich my whole life, and saw this by-election coming up in September. So I was going to leave for my trip in December. There was a September by-election, and it was the summer right now. And I sort of tossed around the idea of running in the by-election. And I had a lot of people actually who were quite close to me, a lot of family, not a lot of family members, but some members of my family, some people who I actually looked up to quite a bit, some people who mentored me who would say things like, you know, Ned, I think you'd be great for politics one day, but you know, it's a really hard thing to get elected, and maybe you should work on someone else's campaign this time and think about college, and say those sorts of things. And that was really, really tough for me to hear. And I was very close in that summer to not running in that by-election and just taking the easy route, so to speak, and just not having to worry about, you know, what if I don't perform that well? What if I embarrass myself? What if it doesn't work out the way I thought it would? And I was very close to making that decision, but I decided to just sort of say, well, I shouldn't swear on this conference here, but I say, F it, you know, I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna believe in myself and put my name forward because this is what I want to do. And so that's what I did. And in that by-election, it worked out quite well for me. I think the moment in that by-election when I realized that this is really what I wanted to do, what I was meant for, is during the first all candidates debate, when there was about 400 people packed into my own local neighborhood church for our all candidates debate, and I was absolutely terrified, incredibly nervous going up on stage, worried that I was going to be stumped on a question, or you know, freeze and not be able to speak properly. And when I got up there, the words just sort of flowed, and that's when I realized that this is something that came naturally to me, and this is something that I not only that came naturally to me, but something that I really, really enjoyed. And so coming out of that by-election, I placed 5th out of 10 candidates, and so that was a huge boost of confidence for myself. Although I was far from winning, so to speak, that by-election, it was a huge boost of confidence because it showed me that I was a serious contender, but also B, I was able to, you know, perform quite well, considering that I didn't have nearly as much experience or money, quite frankly, or budget or campaign resources as everybody else. So that was a big sort of a boost of confidence for me. And from there, I wanted to sort of put every ounce of energy that I had into the general election. And so I was able to, luckily enough, meet people like Kyle, who was my campaign manager throughout that general election, and a friend from high school, Kathy. So I had a small but mighty campaign team of 3. You know, although we did not have as much experience, perhaps, as the other candidates, what we did have was energy and drive. You know, we were all young, so we were able to, you know, do, you know, for example, I didn't have to pay, you know, a really expensive professional graphic designer. I had, you know, a friend who already sort of figured that kind of thing out through school. You know, I designed my own website. I used social media to my advantage, and I used these different things to my advantage, and I guess built some momentum amongst the community that, you know, this could actually happen. I could actually get elected, even though I was still a teenager and only had barely turned drinking age. And so I think that that sort of momentum started to build, and we started to use those different things to our advantage as young people. And I was able to get elected and finish 3rd out of 18 candidates and receive 16,000 votes and get elected as the youngest person to Saanich Council and CRD. So now I get to sort of live my childhood dream, or my teenage dream, so to speak, and you know, I get to work with people like Jeremy on advocating for more funding for public transit and things like that. So I really, really enjoy the work that I'm able to do now. It's a dream come true. I love it. But most importantly, if there's anything that I can accomplish in my, I guess, entry into politics, I really hope that I can inspire other young people to put their name forward and to just say, you know, screw it. If they're, you know, if their mentors or people who who they look up to don't necessarily believe in them, because if young people, quite frankly, believe in themselves, then we can change this world. And so I really hope that I can inspire other young people to get involved, and I am already inspired to see all of the young faces in this call here, and all of the people who are nominated in this award. I think we are going to be the ones who start to turn the tide on things like climate change, and so it's so exciting to see. So thanks, Starfish and everybody, for being here and for letting me tell my story.
Thanks so much, Ned. A big round of applause. Yeah, and I'll echo that, is that if there is young people here who are looking to jump into politics, or you know, have anything leap like that, something that they desire doing but they aren't quite sure how to do it, I'll put it out there that I'm happy to chat and give guidance to anyone who's looking to make that kind of jump. I think we need the leadership of young change makers like those of you who are being awarded, and also others on the call who are similarly leading in the community. So thanks so much, Ned. Our final storytellers and Starfish Top 25 for the year speakers today are Anastasia Castro and Char Brady from Kids for Plastic Free Canada. I know them because they've lobbied me as a Victoria City Councillor and have presented fierce, fact-based and passionate speeches at Council, Victoria Council and councils throughout the region, calling for an end to single-use plastics and moving away from a culture of disposability and towards one that respects the regenerative nature of the economy that we need. So I've been really inspired by both of these young leaders in the past, and thank them for their efforts on the banning of single-use plastic bags and other single-use items, and look forward to continued success on that front with leadership from them and from others like them. So please give a really warm welcome and see some welcoming. All right.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Councillor Loveday. Just before we start, can you all hear me? And Kat, you turn your mic on as well. I guess we're just going to talk at the same time. It's absolutely amazing to be in a room with all of these people who are being recognized. It's also amazing to see Mr. Taylor in person. I'd just like to thank you for, I know we have been to your council. I know you supported us when we were trying to get the ban passed through Saanich, and we never really got a chance to thank you. So from one youth leader to another, you are incredibly inspiring, and thanks for holding us up.
Thank you so much.
So where should we begin? I'm assuming somewhere at the start.
Yeah.
You want to go first, or should I?
After you.
Okay. So I started looking into environmentalism when I was in grade 5. I had met one of my mom's teachers, and I had gotten to it that way. But my environmental career really started when I met Anastasia in grade 8. And I honestly didn't know that much about what activism was. I knew that, with a Fin Free group, for example, you could go to car washes, you could try to get information out, but I didn't really know the mechanism for making that kind of change. And I was lucky enough to have a partner like Anastasia because she was really the passion behind getting everything started. So starting our initiative was one part unified belief in our cause and one part luck. Again, we just happened to meet in the same class, and we joined up with our teacher, Margaret McCullough, who is not here but is an incredible force for change, to create a small group called Victoria Ban the Bag, speaking out about the impacts of plastic bags in our environment and the local community. We originally were only 4 people, just acting as an offshoot of the Greater Surfrider branch. We started by talking to our neighbors, peers, honestly anyone that would listen about how to make small daily changes in reducing plastics. We knew we needed to go bigger than local information campaigns, bigger than word of mouth. So we decided with our teacher to address Victoria City Council in a public forum to bring forward a plan of action regarding single-use plastics in our community. Do you want to go next, or should I? It's all right. Okay, I'll continue for a bit. So Anastasia and I prepared our speeches for weeks, her definitely working on hers a lot more than I had since I was a debater, and I was hoping that I would be able to speak well when I was up. But in all honesty, we were both terrified. Neither of us had ever been to a major Victoria City Council meeting where we would be speaking. I think she'd seen it a bit more than I had, but I was going into it completely blind. And standing up in front of an entire room of people in grade 8 for the first time was daunting, let alone an extremely official committee of our city's leaders. But we were confident in our information, even more confident in the people around us, and we just gave it our all. We spoke from the heart, and we explained how you could make these small daily changes, what single-use plastics was doing to our environment, and why we needed to change. The moment that we started speaking, we saw the way the room reacted to us, these small children talking about extremely important issues. Despite being so young, we knew that we were making a difference. And from there and subsequent meetings, we were able to be a leading force in the policy that got developed in our city and act as community leaders in ensuring tangible change got made. Having this opportunity changed the way that we looked at activism, from simply dispersing information and hoping that the public would pick up on it, to being able to use our platform to inspire change and inspire other youth leaders around us.
So for years, we continued this campaign. We reached out to businesses, we helped educate the public, we worked with other youth, and we were just trying to reduce single-use plastics and garner support for the cause. And one day, quite a few years later, we got the opportunity of a lifetime to partner with the UVic Environmental Law Center. And so dedicated professors and students there wrote a report for us on legal recommendations for single-use plastics for the province. And it was beyond just being a report, though. It was essentially a template for a provincial law to ban single-use plastics. It was a concrete guide for tackling single-use plastics on a large, long-lasting scale. And so, ecstatic and very determined to present that report, we asked to meet with the BC Environment Minister, George Heyman, to discuss action on single-use plastics. And we didn't expect him to agree readily or even agree at all. He had no legal obligation to do so, and why would he want to be pestered by a group of students? But he did agree. And a few months later, somehow we were sitting in a conference room with heavy wooden furniture and a long, solid table running down the middle. And it was so packed with people, they had to bring in more and more chairs, but eventually they gave up and some people just had to stand. And it was very surreal because that people actually cared about what we had to say, and that this group of youth, that we were being listened to, that we were considered leaders somehow. And looking back, we had come so far from that moment at Victoria Council as two tiny 12-year-olds just shaking in our shoes, but determined nonetheless to do something for our world. Because I suppose ultimately it doesn't matter where or how you begin, as long as you just take that first step. And it can be very intimidating. You don't know where to start, who to talk to, what cause to take up, or what organization to do it with. And it can seem like a lot when you just stare at the mountain with no way of finding the trail to get up it. But I kind of think of it like getting into a pool. You dip your toe in, and it seems freezing cold. But once you're in, you realize it really wasn't that bad. You just have to take that first plunge. And getting started, I think, is the hardest thing, because once you're going, you kind of have that momentum to carry on a lot farther than you ever thought you could get.
Thank you. Is that you're wrapped up? I'm trying to give space if there's if there other more back and forth.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we could add. I mean, she is completely right. It has been such a surreal experience to be listened to. It's been such a surreal experience to walk into George Heyman's office and know that we were going to make change that day. And although he is not here, I would just love to give a big thank you to Calvin Sanborn, to the UVic Law Department, to Margaret McCullough, to our parents, to everyone who supported us throughout all of this, because as Anastasia has told me many times, it's not just the individual fight, it's the long battle. And you have to rely on your partners and you have to continue on. There are times when you look at something that you have to write, a speech for something, or an event that you signed up for, and you go, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I know that the people around me do, and I know that I have that support. I've done it before, and I just need to keep going, because in the end, it's going to be worth it. And I've been lucky enough to have someone who supports me like that.
Great, thank you so much for your leadership, and as someone who was there for your what you referred to as your as a tiny 12-year-old shaking in your boots. Even at that point, you were fierce advocates, and it's been amazing to watch that transition to the point where we are. When I helped bring forward the motion to ban plastic bags at Victoria City Council, I honestly, everyone, like a lot of people thought that was rash and too fast moving, and that was there was advocacy by Surfrider and other youth leaders who led to that, some of whom are on the call. I can see there's some faces there. But to see how quickly it's moved to have provincial buy-in and other councils, Saanich with Ned, and I really do think that the leadership of young people being fierce advocates, especially those who are on this call and those we just heard from, really transitioned and got people who are in positions of power to take these issues seriously. So I thank you for your leadership and for sharing that story today. I'm continually inspired and look forward to seeing what comes next. I've got a couple questions that have been sent to me, and we're open to a few more if people have any. The first one is for Talen, and it's following up on your story. So wondering if you have any resource recommendations for settlers who are looking to either do science-based work or activism in a way that honors Indigenous knowledge.
That is such a great question. Thank you, Jeremy. And I'll start with my answer actually by adding on to what you replied, Jeremy, earlier to what I said, is that absolutely when I'm speaking about this story as well, I'm very much in the process, and will be for my whole life, of learning more about how to be respectful in the land that I'm on as well. That's just like, it's an ongoing process. That was just like a little piece of the, I guess, what I consider to be one of the starts of it. For resources, there is a recommendation. I worked as a coastal naturalist with Parks Canada and with Saanich and Hul'qumi'num Nations this past summer, and there was a recommendation that's really, really good for learning about different traditional territories in Canada, and it's literally just blanking my mind right now. And I might actually ask you, Jeremy, if you know what I'm talking about, please help me out because I forget it. For this question, if it's all right for this person, feel free to email me, and I can send you a little list when I am completely conscious, because I do have some lovely little resources that have helped me that I just am completely blanking with right now, but they are in my computer here. I just forget all the URLs, so I'm so sorry.
Perfect. Do you think you could send that to Kyle, and then Kyle can share it around, perhaps?
Absolutely. So just to clarify, there was resources about it. Was it the Lekwungen territory specifically, or just in the area here?
I think whatever you think has been most inspiring for you. This is really just about trying to find resources so other people can go down, know how to start that same journey that you've been on of understanding how to do work as a settler in a good way, as an activist or in terms of science-based work. So
absolutely. Okay, so I will say I will first off send those things to Kyle for sure. And I will say though that one of those journey starts is just, for example, once you find whose territory you're on, that nation likely has a website as well. I recommend learning it first from the people whose land it is, and going and accessing their resources directly. If you can, I feel like is a great place, because oftentimes I find that those websites have a story that people are willing to share about how they relate to the land. Where do they count their territory to expand to, and what kind of, for example, community events or stories are they willing to share with you? So that's the first thing that I'll say right now, and then I will add more with Kyle later. So thanks, Jeremy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Our next question is for Ned. And Ned, I'm wondering if you have any lessons learned to share in terms of advocacy. And that can either be as a community advocate, or as an elected person, or as an elected person who has people advocate to you. in terms of what makes advocacy impactful?
Wow, that's a big question. It's a really good one. I guess one thing certainly that I've learned throughout, from I guess sort of start to present in terms of getting involved in politics and on council. I mean, you're always going to make mistakes, and it really is those mistakes that you learn from. I know that's something that everybody says, but I've I mean, so my first number of months in office, you know, I thought, you know, I'm an elected official now. I have to, you know, be doing these things properly and whatnot. And I've tried now, about after a year into it or so, not to be too hard on myself if I do make mistakes or slip up or whatever the case may be, because I think that's natural and that's an opportunity for me to learn. But I think I guess in terms of advocacy, I think when I've been able to see advocacy be so successful is really when you're able to, I guess, build a really strong case, provide the evidence that for your case, but also but be able to inspire people. You know, I think when I've brought forward a number of motions at the CRD and other places, I think when they've been so successful is when they've gathered enough sort of public attention and public support, and that just builds to the point where even if the politicians around the table may not love the idea, you know, if the public support is there and the public attention is there, and this is something that's inspiring people, I think that is when you'll see advocacy be so successful. And it is in fact the people who can be in a large number much more powerful than the people with power themselves. So I found I found it to be really inspiring seeing, you know, the room packed at the CRD for an issue that's very important to me, and to see you know, that it's important to other people. And I think that's when things are so successful, is when they gather that significant public attention and public support. And that's what we're seeing right now with young people across the country on climate change. And I think it is the young generation, it is my generation, I think particularly, that is going to turn the tide on climate change. And that's what's necessary. I think we're, if, you know, we are the folks who have to do it because it's our butts on the line, quite frankly. And so that's what I'm starting to see with the environmental movement. And that's part of why I'm so inspired by so many of the folks in this virtual room here.
Great, thanks so much, Ned. And our final question for Char and Anastasia. I'm wondering, on your multi-year campaign on single-use plastics, if you have a highlight or a moment that stands out for you.
Oh, gee. I mean, it's kind of hard to come up with certain moments. I'd say the things, I guess, that stand out the most are never the events themselves, but I guess the people that you do it with, and then these small moments where you realize you're getting somewhere and it just starts to add up. And then looking back, you kind of see this trail of just these moments with all these people that have been supporting you for so long. Like Charlotte, you've been amazing. You've put up with so much of my stuff and really been there to support me, and Ms. McCullough. And so I guess it's like when you're looking back at the Victoria Council, seeing that first moment of just trying to get through 2 minutes of speaking without breaking down, all the way up to, I suppose, this new moment working on, even on this event with Charlotte. You kind of remember those interactions with people a lot more, and that's kind of what I guess helps bring you forward. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I can think of one, which isn't so much the moment itself. It's more everything that led up to it and just realizing where we were. A few years ago, in 2018, I think, we went to Vancouver City Council. And it was just my partner and Mrs. McCullough and I. And we were completely alone in this very big city, taking some time off of school, actually, to go to this event that we've been invited to. And it was just the moment that we walked into this building that we'd never seen. And not only did they know who we were, which was incredible, but they had faith in us. And we were going up against industry execs. Like, we knew that these were the people who were going to be fighting for plastics. And we had the right information, and we brought it to the council, and it was accepted that this was the truth. This was what was going on. when you're fighting for the ocean, your case has to be watertight if you want to turn the tide on these issues. And just knowing that we had faith in ourselves, we had faith in what we were saying, and there was nothing in that room that could dispute the fact that we were fighting for the right cause. Just that kind of moment of realizing that everything was coming together, and having the most incredible woman in the world, two incredible women in the world beside me. So, yeah.
Likewise, Char. Thanks.
Thank you, Kat.
That's amazing. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up this this event here today. We've heard some very powerful stories, some inspiring stories from young change makers here in the region, and look forward to seeing the continued work and advocacy and seeing what can be accomplished by this next generation of young leaders who really, as Ned said, are turning the tide on climate change and making sure that we're living in a way that's sustainable and that is ecologically just. And so I'll turn it back over to Kyle just to say last closing words, but I just want to thank everyone and thank Kyle for including me as the host. This is it is a great honor for me. I really enjoy it, and I'm inspired by all of you. And it's been a great way to start this Monday morning and hearing from you all today. So I'll hand it back over to Kyle.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. And thank you everyone for your participation. That was fantastic. Really excited. And as Jeremy said, it's a fantastic way to start a week. I really do feel like the rest of the day I'm going to be walking with a little bit of a skip in my step. I do want to say that we are actually doing these all week, this week and into next week as well. And so if you want to hear some more stories from some of our top 25 winners, you can head to our Facebook page, you can, or any of our social media platforms to figure out when our next event is. Our next one is certainly tomorrow, and it's on adventures near and far. And so we'll have 3 presenters talking about some of the trips that they've taken, what they've learned. Some of those trips are next door to Alberta, some of them are to the Antarctic. And so it is genuinely a very interesting expedition, and really excited for that. And again, many more events. We have 6 more lined up over the next 2 weeks, so please feel free to check them out. Again, thank you all for participating today and for listening. I really appreciate you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much again, Kyle.
Thank you.